Good morning, everyone. The Dean has reminded us 27 times to make sure we stay on time. I always prepare twice as many slides as I can possibly get to. But anyway, I'd like to begin a little bit differently this morning before I expound wisdom. I'd like you to take a minute and talk to your neighbor about what you think is the cause of the achievement gap without blaming the victim, okay? We know that they come from homes where parents, the usual, don't read to them, they don't have enough to eat, and their lives in many cases are not as smooth as what we would think of typically as what happens in a beaver cleaver home. So just chat for a minute, that's all. Why do you think in Connecticut, the richest state arguably in the nation, we have been not only have the largest achievement gap in the country, but we've been unable to close it. So just talk about that for a minute or two. All right, if I can have your attention, and I know you could go on for quite some time on this topic. We have them from 8 o'clock in the morning until 3 or 3:15 in the afternoon, and again, the rest of the lives of many young people are out of our hands. But at the same time, my major concern is what we do during that particular time that we have young people in school. And if I can explain the title here from the other end of the pipeline, I believe that I can summarize a lot of my work over the last several years as applying the pedagogy of gifted education to total school improvement. And this has not earned me a lot of love in gifted land because they feel we own thinking skills and we own creativity and we own all those kinds of things. And so what's the rest of the diet like? Is it just a rice and beans diet and drill and practice? And so my work did begin with basically a targeted population of quote unquote gifted students, although as you will see in a few minutes, I've defined giftedness a lot differently than many of my colleagues. And basically applying 3 different integrated types of enrichment to this group. And it was a very popular model. In fact, it became the most widely used model in gifted education in the world. And you would have thought that that would have made me happy. But I also realized that working with my partner, Sally Reese, that a lot of these kinds of things were what was missing from the curriculum, the regular curriculum. And so sometime in the 1980s, we fashioned what was the theoretical core of our work, which is right here, into what we call the school-wide enrichment model. And don't let the big complicated cube throw you off, because it's basically, it's really just an organizational plan. And in this plan, we have 3 different what we call service delivery components. One is comprehensive strength assessment. Someone once described for me diagnostic prescriptive education, remedial education, as finding out what a child can't do, won't do, doesn't like to do, and spend the rest of the year beating them to death with it. And it hasn't worked. The achievement gap grows wider. The second is various kinds of curricular modification techniques. Differentiation, personalization are very big items in education. You hear them all the time. You've been to all the differentiation workshops. I have a problem with those workshops in that most of the focus is just on content modifications. You're behind, we give you extra worksheets. You're ahead, we'll give you some more challenging problems, and it ends there. But I believe that there are other things that if we're going to do comprehensive strength assessment, we must look at least 3 other things besides achievement level. And those things are interests. I can get more out of any kid by working in an area where she or he has expressed some interest. The second is learning styles, how they would like to pursue their work. And then the third is preferred modes of expression. Not every kid expresses himself in the typical schoolhouse ways, speaking it and writing it. Progress is impossible without change, as we heard so well this morning, and people that can't change their minds can't change anything. And the policymakers in education in America have basically made up their mind that drill and practice is the way that we're going to overcome the achievement gap. It just hasn't worked. So they add more in drill and practice. If it didn't work, we'll just add more. And it still doesn't work. And so anyway, our model, you guys recognize this diagram on the screen. If I tilt the screen a little bit, you recognize it. We see these two ancient engineers of yore looking at a set of plans, and one says to the other, I skimped a little on the foundation, but no one will ever know it. And so our work is based around an organized model, the school-wide enrichment model, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move along. But I'm a quotaholic. If you don't stand for something, you're likely to fall for anything. And so what's happened is we've thrown all of these endless, quote, innovations that are supposed to be silver bullets at the school. They just haven't worked, to the point where now when another silver bullet comes in, teachers say, oh, here we go again. We won't pay much attention because it will change again next year. And then finally, this quote comes from Tom Stoppard's play, Arcadia, you can't open a door unless you have a house. And I believe that the school-wide enrichment model is a house with a lot of doors in it we'll be talking about. Our work is research-based. We've been working on research, especially with low-income students, for many years. The theory you already saw, the Triad, but it's very much practice-driven. My best ideas come from going into schools. I'm in schools a lot, and I see a teacher doing something, and that something works, and I talk to that teacher, someone like Melissa who's doing things like National History Day, and the next thing I've got her on the road going to a number of other schools teaching kids and teachers how to do National History Day. So again, I mentioned Triad, SEM, the three service delivery components brought to bear on three school structures: the regular curriculum, a thing we call enrichment clusters. We'll talk a little bit about enrichment clusters, and then anything else, the way that we organize and group students, extracurricular activities, after-school programs, and things like that. A lot of schools have bought into after-school programs, and guess what they do? Homework helper, more worksheets, instead of doing something that will focus on their strengths. So the three major focuses of why is this guy, it's not working for me the way it ought to. Let's try it again. Three major focuses of our work has been really, again, on this broadened conception of giftedness, where we look at what I call the big five. Certainly we want to look at their academic strength areas, but also the other things that I mentioned, interests and learning styles, etc. All of these things were paper and pencil instruments until about almost now 10 years ago, when we built them into a digital electronic program that I'll be talking about. This is, again, has to do with the assessment. This has to do with the three types of service. And in the Triad model, what I recommend is two types of general enrichment. And here's where we find all the kinds of thinking skills, 21st century skills, all of those things that we make available for all kids. And the ways in which kids respond to those, as well as the regular curriculum or a non-school experience, determines whether they should take the next step. And so I've made a great fame and fortune out of this model, but it's organized common sense. There's nothing that doesn't happen outside of classrooms that doesn't work like this. Then the third thing, again, is a internet-based program that I'll be talking about and giving you a couple of examples. And in this program, we've taken all of these paper and pencil instruments and built them into a sit down at your computer and punch keys, and out the other end of the computer and into a database go all of this kind of information. And then this marvelous search engine scans through each individual child's profile and basically finds activities just for that child. The kind of teaching personalization I'm recommending can't be done without the use of technology. And this was a program that was developed here at the University of Connecticut with lots and lots of venture capital, some of it that came from Neag. Anyway, we'll give you a few examples of this as we move along. Let's see if I can make this work on the next one. Yes, three very simple goals. When people ask me, what's the goals of school-wide enrichment? I know that I can give them a lot of the educational BS. I got a list this long: creative thinking, critical thinking, problem solving, decision making. You know, there are three very simple goals, and those goals are enjoyment. You know from your own life's experience and kids you've worked with, if you enjoy doing something, you do it better. You put more into it. Enjoyment leads to engagement, and engagement leads to enthusiasm for learning. And by that, what I mean is that the whole learning process, it might be something you do in an enrichment cluster and you're really having a ball. We found that kids that have been in schools with big enrichment clusters, their regular classroom achievement goes up. And I'm going to share very quickly with you some data related to that. Let's take a visit. Sometimes speakers talk about a lot of things. I want to take you to a school. This is a school that we started in Hartford. Some teachers from that school are here today.
At Renzulli, they use our intelligence to make us go for the big, more challenging activities that I haven't done before. Teachers that actually understand what I want to learn.
The Joseph S. Renzulli Gifted and Talented Academy, a public middle school, serves children from some of the lowest income families in Hartford, Connecticut. It's a model for what can be done not just in that community, but also nationally.
At my old school, I could be in a class learning addition, but I'm on multiplication level. Here, I'm learning multiplication level or algebra with people who know algebra, not with people who still on division.
There are three things that improve achievement, and I call them the 3 E's. And one is enjoyment. Anything that we enjoy doing, we do better. The second is engagement, that you're really involved in the subject matter that you're learning. You're excited about it and you feel like there is value in it. And the third is enthusiasm for learning. When people ask me what are the goals of the Renzulli Academy, I state it very simply. Our kids are going to go on to 4-year colleges. Some of them are going to go on to graduate school, to medical school, to law school.
One of the things that I think is really important here at the Academy is that we have a group of students who all have the same mission, all have the same drive. And once kids are hooked on something, they'll read just about anything, even if it's a college textbook. They can be proud that, they love to read. They can say that, and that's actually something that, is kind of cool around here.
Here is great. I would not trade this school in for any other school. In 10 years, I will be 23 years old. I will be in college. I promise you that. I will be studying business math, business, and the economy.
The Renzulli Academy has the smallest operating budget and the highest test scores in the city of Hartford. And it's expanding. Within a few years, Renzulli students will range from kindergarten to the senior year of high school.
The Renzulli Academy could work in every urban city across America, and I think every district should have one.
One of the things that is unique about the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation is that they have carved out their turf or their territory for this very particular group of high potential low-income students. I don't think there's any other foundation that has the vision of what the potential of investing in these students can do, first and foremost for the kids themselves, but also for our country. If we're going to compete with other countries in this global economy, we can't throw away this reservoir of talent. One of the things I want to mention about the 3 E's is a metaphor that I use, and it goes something like this: all roads lead to Rome. Now, again, I could put that big long list of 21st century skills up there. They've become cliches. Nobody pays much attention to them. But that's where I want the school to get to. The second part of it is there are many ways to get to Rome. And the reason I approach that is because every Renzulli Academy or every school that uses school-wide enrichment does it their own way. Otherwise, we, Sally and I, the developers, would have overprescribed. And that takes out, it factors out the initiative, the creativity, the energy of any given faculty. We wanted to build it your way as long as you get to Rome and not to Amsterdam or to Beirut. So anyway, now I want to give you an example of Triad in action. And this is an example of a young man who came to one of the first schools I worked with, which was in Baltimore, Maryland. One of my former students, a Neag grad, Gwen Cook, was the coordinator, enrichment coordinator in that school, or coordinator of advanced academics. And this young man was Spanish speaking. He was struggling in every class that he was in. In fact, Gwen told me once that if it weren't for this program, Jonathan would have spent his entire career in what Gwen called remedial everything. Now, we organized a series of type 1s, and the teachers did this. I did not. They picked a theme, and the theme for a given year or semester, I forget which, was cultures from around the world. And they brought people from different cultures in to talk about their food, their history, their art, and all of that. The family down the street that owned the Chinese restaurant brought in about 10 mini woks, and the kids were doing that. But one group that they brought in was a group of traveling Australian Aborigines, and they were paid for by the Maryland Arts in the School program. And they did all the things. They played the didgeridoo, and they showed their batik, and then they took the kids out on the playground and they sailed boomerangs. And picture Jonathan Santos, all of a sudden a big light bulb comes on over his head. The type 1 inspired Jonathan. It might only inspire one kid, and somebody else might have been interested in some other aspect of it. The key here is follow-up. That's the arrow leading from type 1 into type 3 or into type 2. He ran to Gwen and he said, boy, I want to learn more about this. Gwen didn't know anything about it. She had the good sense to take him to the IT teacher. And this is important as well. We can't know everything. Anyway, here's the boomerangs, a shot of the boomerang and the type 1. Jonathan started working on many different kinds of boomerangs and different materials, different lengths, different widths. He found out if they're thinner, they go higher. If they're broader, they stay up longer. He tried many different materials. And we got him some resources. And now we're going to move to type 2. And again, this is where personalization comes in. These are things that come from the web, different websites, and different what we call how-to books. And he learned many, many different kinds of things. Suddenly, he's reading, believe it or not, college-level books on aerodynamics. Sure, he needed a lot of help and had to look up a lot of words. The IT teacher was a great mentor. In one of those books, Jonathan read something that resulted in what I call light bulb number 2. What he read was that the oval shape of an airplane wing that produces its lift during flight causes a swirling vortex of air way out at the wingtips that inhibits lifting, and planes use up to 40% of their fuel to combat that effect. Runs to the IT teacher, could we do something about that? So they started putting little fins on the ends of the boomerangs, and they did indeed behave differently, and I use the word behave advisedly. One of the things, though, was they couldn't measure it. So they switched over to, next slide, they built a wind tunnel, and with the help of a really nice junkyard man that gave them a motor and a fan, they built this wind tunnel, and they started doing this with little tiny gasoline airplane engines, and they put the different fins on. Well, to make a very long story short, they found that they could increase fuel efficiency by 40% by adding those things, because they could measure the drachmas, literally, of fuel. Moon, you could probably have been involved in something like this as a mentor. Anyway, he worked on it. He submitted it to the Maryland State Science Fair. I'm a big believer in the right kinds of competitions. He won it hands down. He went back and he worked on it for another year, submitted it to the International Science and Engineering Fair, the most rigorous competition for young engineers. He beat 560 finalists from throughout the world. He won a college scholarship, plus with his mentor, the IT teacher, a free trip to Stockholm to witness the Nobel Prize ceremonies. And here's a story I like to tell. You see him back here. The teachers had to chip in and buy him a suit, necktie, a suitcase. I mean, they paid for the trip, but all the other kinds of things, you know, a toothpaste, they had to buy him everything for the trip. But the point of all this is that we take the kids through getting interested and turned on, providing them what I call the ORE, O-R-E, opportunities, resources, and encouragement, but always within their interest area, and then the rest is history. The things that make a problem real, the definition of type 3 is individual and small group expressions of real problems, are these 4 things: personalization of interest, use of authentic methodology, that's the type 2, no existing solution or right answer. Imagine where our world would be if inventive people, scientists and engineers, did not tackle problems that haven't been solved, and then designed to have an impact on an audience other than or in addition to the teacher. The raison d'etre, forgive my French, in the creative person is always audience. I'm doing this for a client, for a customer, for a belief, to change the world, to sell a product, to make people believe or pray in a different way. And so we actually use what happens in the real creative world as a guide. Now, concept of OR, opportunities, resources, and encouragement, but again, always, always within the student's area of interest. This is just a few stats up here. Almost half, 44% of low-income students who are classified as high achieving when they enter first grade can no longer be classified as such by the time they reach fifth grade. Isn't it interesting? If you're raising cattle, you hope that the more you feed them, the fatter they'll get. In the case of low-income students, the longer they, especially those with high potential, the longer they stay in school, the lower their scores become. There's something wrong with that model. And again, just a few quotes, and I'm not going to read them all as much as to summarize it. I call it the $3 trillion misunderstanding. That's how much money we spent since 1966, when President Lyndon Johnson first formed, remember the Great Society and Title I and Head Start and all that. States and the federal government have spent $3 trillion. And basically, what we've tried to do is to tackle that problem through organizational things: a longer day, shorter day, uniforms, no uniforms. We've done just about, I've got a list of the things and you'll see some that are laughable. Here are just some of the things. These are all the, what I call initiative overload, and why teachers are so discouraged when a new one comes along. They go on and on and on and on. And here we see proficiency-based learning, and Common Core is one of the more recent ones, but proficiency-based learning, I guess before somebody invented that, we had in-proficiency-based learning. I mean, you see how ridiculous some of these are. And by the way, that list is longer. What's this done to teachers? Very simple. Basically, it's burdened them with this overwhelming amount of paperwork, and now the new teacher evaluation systems are going to make it worse, and Common Core may be an unindicted co-conspirator. I'd like to just run through a few schools. I'm going to really fast on these slides, but everybody wants to see some data. Over the years, we've collected a lot of data in the schools that we've worked with. And when I meet with superintendents, they say, well, that sounds like a good idea, Joe, but I'd like to see some data on that. And we've got lots of data. I've got a whole database on data if you're interested. This is Charter Oak School in Hartford. Here we see what's happened to their scores. This is Connecticut Mastery Test. You see over time, scores have gone up. This is a reduction of achievement gap. When the principal of this school presented this to the West Hartford Board of Education, she had a standing ovation. This is PS 188, Lower Manhattan, a school that I worked with for over 10 years. We've collected data in that school. We see here on the English Language Arts exam the changes in scores over the years, and the changes in math. They grade schools in New York. They always get their A. This is a study that was done by Dr. Gara Field using our online program. Forgive the title. I have to say two things about this program. It's called the Renzulli Learning System. The university named it, paid for it, so forgive that. And the second thing is that the university sold it about 4 years ago to a company in Texas, and if every school in Connecticut or the world bought it, I would not make 5 cents. So, but we built the program because teachers can't do what we're peddling without the use of technology. It just can't happen very easily. And so I'm a great believer in it. Just got a phone call yesterday from Dubai. A school in Dubai wants to buy Renzulli Learning. So here we see the study that Gara did. We see the dark line is the kids. This is a gold standard study. What do I mean by that? Random assignment of both teachers and students to experimental and control group. I can make anything work. Give me the best teachers, the best kids, and the scores will go up. So here we see we started out a little bit lower in oral reading fluency, and as the year progressed, we see the trajectory increasing. Notice here, sometimes random assignment is not your friend. The experimental group was significantly below the control group at the start, and we see what happened throughout the course of the year, and the same here in social studies. So, and here's just a summary of the results, and all of those were statistically significant except science. There was an increase in science, but it was not statistically significant. Here's another school that I work with in New York, South Grove Elementary. We see their data over a period of years. And again, I'm just going to flash these on very quickly because of time. They're all in a database. You see how they compared with similar schools. And by that, they mean by demographics, the same socioeconomic level. And we see great increases here. Now, when I started a school in New York based on this model, I was asked to give the opening address. Wish I could have spoken as well as that young woman this morning. To give the opening address to teachers, parents, kids, school officials. And at the end, a man whose language I could hardly understand, he had a very strong foreign accent, he said, well, what's the mission? What's the purpose of this school? And I know I could have given him the old BS, creative thinking, critical thinking and all, and I believe in those things. It's just that they're cliches. And I stuttered and paused because I had to think something up. And this is what came out of my mouth. The main mission of Bell Academy is that our students, our graduating 8th graders, will apply to and gain entrance to the most competitive high schools in New York City. And New York City has this SHSA, a Specialized High School Aptitude Test. Each year, first I'll tell you a Bell story. This is one of my students who was visiting Bell, and the little girl there is named Georgia, and she's holding a book in her hand. And the book is called Samantha, the Life of a Slave Girl. And I was there one day talking with them, and we were going over where they were going to go to high school next year. And so I asked Georgia where she was going. She said, I'm going to LaGuardia, which is a very prestigious school. It's an exam and audition school because it's in the arts. And I said, what did you do for your audition? And she said, oh, I didn't do a regular audition. I read from my book. Here's the back cover of her book. You see a pretty little girl here. And she told me that that was part of what got her in. And so I said, oh, that's really great. I'd love to see a copy of your book. And here's her answer. She said, oh, you can get it on Amazon. Well, you see, did you see that, my little off-the-cuff definition of type 3? Thinking, feeling, and doing, like the practicing professional, even at a more junior level. And so I love to tell this story. And of course, later she went and got me a book and signed it. And now that she's an author, she can dye her hair purple. Okay, each year at Bell, the kids go out on the playground and make the number of their graduating class. So here's the class of 2010, and here are some of their, I'm going to put these on real quick. Here are some of their accomplishments, the schools that they've got into, including private schools with scholarship. But note number, the last item there. Bell had more students admitted to Bronx High School of Science, the most famous school in the country, than any other middle school in New York City. And so I think that, remember that thing I made up on the spur of the moment, they got their A, which is, again, here's the class of 2011. And again, here you see Bronx Science, Stuyvesant, Brooklyn Tech, all the schools that some of our kids got into. And here's several kids getting into private schools, in many cases with scholarship. Another A, the class of 2012. Again, I want to point out that these are not one-off deals. You know, we had a good year and left. It just continues and goes on. So anyway, the conclusion of all of this is that the 3 E's lead to higher achievement, in addition to the other kinds of satisfaction, like, for example, George's book and Jonathan's airplane wing research. And in cases where, in some cases, we've increased test prep, but we've got a fancy name for it. It's called time on task. And time on task really means that we're just running more worksheets at kids. And so how do we go about doing this? glad you asked that question. We are stuck with a centrally determined curriculum. And now it's getting worse with Common Core. But Common Core isn't a new kid on the block. Every state had standards before that. And if I were to talk to a superintendent and even hint that I was going to mess with that school curriculum, there would be a few niceties and then I would be ushered out the door. That's the way it works. And so we've developed an approach that we call infusing. And what we try to do, think of a great big, the example that I use is one of those things that you put jelly in and you squeeze the handle and it punches the jelly into a jelly donut, that we're going to look for opportunities within the required curriculum where we can infuse some kinds of enrichment activities. And again, this is where the electronic program comes in handy. It takes about 3 years for this to take place. It doesn't happen overnight. A lot of staff development. Most of the people that Rich mentioned this morning, we've had over 35,000 people attend Confortute. Many people have taken our courses and our online courses. And in fact, in many cases, a lot of these people, some of them are here in the room, are so good at what they're doing that I've got them out on the road. In fact, we did with 4 of our students, we did all of the staff development under a contract with National Public Radio in the state of Arkansas the summer before last. All teachers in Arkansas are now getting their staff development on SEM through television. Now, do you know that at least once a week I get a personal letter from Amazon and Netflix? There, dear Joe Renzulli. And do they send me the billion books that are for print? Of course not. They know what I've bought before. And by the way, I bought something at Orvis Clothing, and now Orvis pops up on anything that I go. And so a man named Bezos that started Amazon, when they said, why are you selling these books under cost? And he says, because I want their information. Remember that first bar in the SEM. The more we know about a student, not just their achievement level, but their interest, the more we can do to personalize the curriculum for that student. And that's one of the reasons, again, that we developed this online program. We have developed a professional development site, our summer Confortute program plus on-site work. Nicole, wave your hand, Nicole. Nicole is our outreach coordinator. She's all over the country and the world with her team doing professional development. But we look again at individual student strength assessment, personalized learning, infusion strategies, and then the use of technology. Oh, there's my little device. And I always ask this as how many people know what that is? And I've already told you. And only 1 or 2 do. And then I say, big fat hint, and that is. So I'm a little bit ahead of myself. So anyway, basically, Infusion takes a look at the regular curriculum, and then we're going to select something, we're going to inject it or infuse it into the curriculum, and then for kids that really get turned on by it, we're going to see how far we can go. So look at Jonathan Santos, almost 2 years. And that wouldn't have happened. Well, we don't do that in school. The unit comes to an end or the bell rings and we move on to something else. And so that's a part of the infusion process. I love this Ben Franklin quote. If you would persuade, you must appeal first to interest rather than intellect. So here's an example that I did with a group of teachers in Florida. I said, pick something that's routine that kids have to memorize. They picked U.S. states and capitals. In 10 minutes, they came up with 22 ideas for jazzing up states and capitals. And this was a mostly Hispanic-speaking school or population. And once a month in this class assembly, they have to sing the Florida state anthem. And they hate that song worse than the devil hates holy water. And so they said, we want to develop a rap song, which they did. They developed a rap Florida anthem. So you see, I'm not saying that's going to change the world. What I'm saying is it changes the way kids learn and get motivated to learn. Okay, so there you see, if you're interested in taking a look, just go to www.renzullilearning.com if you're interested in taking a look at the program. Again, the way that the system works, and it's as good for teachers as it is for kids, and I'll try to give you an example of that. Yes, I do have an example. Kid sits down at their computer and they answer a series of questions of all of those paper and pencil instruments that we developed in the early days, which really were a part of the problem. Teachers had to analyze them themselves. And then the search engine with 14 databases. So here you see, for example, creative thinking activities, critical thinking activities, how-to books, which I'm totally in love with. You saw the ones Jonathan Santos got. Contests and competitions, that's how we found out about what? International Science and Engineering Fair. So again, we can't do this without using technology. I'm as interested in the way teachers use this. Here we go. So here's a teacher, and she's teaching civilization and ancient Egypt. See if I can highlight that. And so she puts that in her search engine, and up come many, many different enrichment activities. All of our activities follow a template. They first of all must be highly engaging. No worksheets, no textual material online. It has to be something kids do rather than just simply sit and listen to. And one of them that she really liked was Fun with Mummies. And basically there's a little description there. You think, well, that's something that we would like to do. She clicks on it and she gets this activity. And this is an activity, a virtual dissection of an Egyptian mummy. You get a series of tools. Here's the hook. You take the brains out through the nose, you put them in a jar, you label the jar, then you go on to the scalpel, you remove each organ. Everything is in hypertext, so they learn all of the Egyptian words. And again, you could find this on Google. Go home tonight and put Google in your search engine. Just put Egypt in. You will get 40 million hits. And some of them, a few things the Egyptians did you don't want your kids to see. So what we've done is we've had content teams in each of the major subject areas who go through thousands and thousands of resources and then pick the ones that they're all free, except in the case of like how-to books. You might have to buy that. The whole book can't be online. And so I think that if you want to infuse, if you want to jazz up your curriculum, you've got to have a quick and easy way to find these resources and materials. And again, I think I had the databases on. There's about 60,000 resources, 50,000 online, which means you'll get the actual resource like the Egyptians. About 10,000 are things you might have to buy or write for. So again, the theme, all roads lead to Rome, but there are many ways to get to Rome. And one of the things I believe is that most innovations in education have failed because we've factored out of that the faculty of any given school. We want them to do it their way as long as they get to Rome. So keep the objectives very simple, but the opportunities, again, as I said earlier, I hope I never see 2 carbon copies of an SEM school, because if that's the case, then we will have overprescribed. Gail Herman is here, fantastic storyteller, nationally winning storyteller, other storytellers. So the point is, if a school has a teacher like Gail in it, then take advantage of that talent, and just as we saw other examples. And so that also is very infectious. When we start to see other teachers doing great things, then all of a sudden we say, wow, I'd like my kids to have a chance to do things like that. I like this quote too. If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that if you don't like this model, that's okay. My feelings will be hurt, but that's still okay. But find another model. Otherwise, remember that long list I put on earlier of all of the flavor of the month innovations? You'll fall for any of those. People have asked me 1,000 times, what makes for an outstanding SEM school? And I've discussed this with our staff. We talked about it a lot because we get that question. And the first thing is simply knowledge about the model. And again, that's why we have our staff development, our courses, Confortute, our on-site staff development that we do in schools around the country. The second thing is ownership. You've got to build it your own way, as long as you get to Rome. If you're not getting to Rome, then the third is, not just T&A trust. Trust between the teacher and the administrator, usually the principal or central office administrators. I've told you fun stories today. I can tell you horror stories. In fact, I have a folder on my computer called Happy Letters, Sad Letters. And one of the sad letters that actually caused us to start a summer institute within Confortute just for principals is a teacher wrote and said they came 3 or 4 teachers from their school, they were been back, they were all revved up, they wanted to do great things, and the principal says, not here. Basically, it's practice, drill, worksheets. We've got to get the scores up. And we know that enrichment can do it easier. The second is energy. This won't happen among lazy people. You have got to put some time and energy into it. And speaking of energy, our speaker this morning couldn't be a better example of what an energetic teacher is all about. The third is attitude. I think I've got a slide here. Yes, one more slide. Attitude is everything. And that starts to change the culture of the school. People start to think, we're doing more important things. Again, no more beautifully said. And that's what causes what we consider to be a trophy SEM school. In one of the schools that we work with, they've got this sign in the hallway. And here's a young man pointing to it. Attitude is everything. And so isn't it sad that urban districts often most frequently fall prey to the drill and practice models? Some of you may have been around 10 years ago when Hartford, the city of Hartford adopted Success for All. And in that model it says, if a child finishes his or her work before the other kids, don't move forward with them, wait until the other kids catch up. And the teachers were, I was there one day and the teacher had this paper and it said, pause, smile, look up. I mean, we're lobotomizing the profession when we do that. And then we wonder why, you know, there is so much dissatisfaction. And there's so many ways to relate things to the just regular stuff to the regular curriculum. Take my example of the rap song that the kids in Florida developed. Among the other ideas that they came up with and gave kids choices to follow through. They didn't say, okay, everybody's going to do the rap song, because then we would be disallowing what is some of our principles about choice. But the teacher, I got some slides on this, but the teacher built a floor size map of the United States. And then they located the capital of the state. And she developed some games, like one was a hopscotch game. If you hop from one I state to the next, you got a point. So from Illinois to Indiana, you got a point. But Iowa is further away, and you got 2 points. Idaho was way far away, you got 5 points. They found on the internet, I don't know if it was on Renzulli Learning or some other place, they found, and this is a good example of selection, injection, extension. They found a company that sells state-shaped cookie cutters. And by the way, I've got that website, but if you put that in your browser, you'll find it. So a group of kids decided they were going to form a cookie company based on states. And they put a little chocolate dot where the capital was. And then they started learning how to bake these cookies. And so, but it's not, does that cause them to learn states and capitals better? I don't know. I think it does in some ways. But what it does is it creates the third E, enthusiasm for learning. Let me end with one example that is familiar to you all, us all Connecticutonians. In the Triad model, you see an arrow going from non-school experiences up into type 3. A little boy in southeastern Connecticut read a column filler in Newsweek that said that the first United States nuclear submarine name is the Nautilus. It was going to be retired. And at that time, they were going to retire it at the alma mater of the then president of the United States. So which one of our presidents was a Submariner Naval Academy graduate? Jimmy Carter, okay. Well, this kid went ballistic. As you know, that area of Connecticut, Groton, New London, is a company town. They build ships, they've got the naval base. He just went ballistic. And he said, that's wrong. They call them boats there. My father worked on that boat. All my uncles worked on that boat. That boat should be retired here. Teacher said, well, let's do something about it. Take action. We got him some how-to books. One of them was Sylvia Lewis's book, Kid's Guide to Social Action. It teaches kids how to write a petition, how to write a proposal, how to interview a public official. He would stand outside the sub base and the naval base and get signatures. Shopping, but wherever two were gathered, he would give a speech. He got into Chris Dodd's office. Chris was then the U.S. rep from the 2nd District. He got to Washington to talk to some congressional subcommittee. And guess what? The Nautilus is back where it belongs. It's back in Connecticut. And it was all through opportunities, resources, and encouragement, but always in the area of the interest of that child. And so even the regular curriculum, if we're jazzing kids up enough to get interested in something, then basically bring your interest, your topics to school. And all of those examples, the cookie cutter company and the Nautilus submarine, are what I would call extensions. The type 1 for this little boy didn't even have anything to school. Time magazine column filler. That turned him on. But he knew that the school was a place where he could bring his ideas and he could do some follow-up. One of my, again, former students was a teacher in that program, and she said, wow, you know, grab the ball and run with it. And I've got a couple handouts before I let you guys go, but one of my favorite handouts in all the world is by Dwight Eisenhower, and I don't quote a lot of Republicans. But he was actually talking about the unbelievable restrictions and regulations put out by the Department of Agriculture. And this applies to education as well. He said, farming looks mighty easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from a cornfield. And what we've got are state agencies, although there's a young man I'll be promoting for State Commissioner of Education in the very near future. But I think that that's part of the problem, that people sitting in state agencies, and by the way, if you think it's bad here in America, go overseas. The Minister of Education in Argentina said to me with great pride, I can tell you, Dr. Renzulli, what page in mathematics every 4th grader in this country is on today. And that's the city, you know, farming's easy. Teaching's easy if you're 1,000 miles from a classroom. And so I think that we are an over-regulated profession. And we're not going to change it very easily, especially now with Common Core coming down the line. And there's some good parts to Common Core in that they are now emphasizing more process skills. The ones in reading and math are junk compared to the ones that the science groups have put out. If you look at the Science Common Core, it just absolutely, I mean, there should be a halo around that list of...
and the C3 framework for social studies.
Yes, so, but anyway, so we're now paying attention to that. Why? Well, because the job market of the future is not going to depend on whether you know the states or capitals. It's just not. It's going to be on those other kinds of thinking skills activities. However, for the foreseeable future, because acquired, received knowledge is and will continue to be the easiest type of knowledge to measure. Achievement tests are still going to be running a lot of what happens in classrooms, and the Common Core and achievement tests are two parts of the same equation. So we can't change that. You know, if I walked in and said, throw everything out and do enrichment stuff, they, again, would politely usher me out the door. So what I'm saying is, let's look within any situation where we can infuse an enrichment activity that will turn on 1 kid, 2 kids, a half a dozen kids. And the enrichment clusters have been really great in doing this with larger groups, and we will see some change. This is a more realistic way of looking at change. I've always said if I came back in another life, I would create a college major which is called change, and just study how we can change things that are not serving our needs well. I've got 2 papers here. One is called The Achievement Gap and the Education Conspiracy Against Low-Income Children. And I use the conspiracy. They're not people in smoke-filled back rooms saying we got to keep poor people dumb because we need people to empty bedpans in nursing homes and work at McDonald's. We haven't done that. But neglect and mismanagement, and again, buying into some things like success for all, that's the equivalent of a conspiracy. So if you're interested in that paper, we'll circulate that. And then a shorter version of the same, you only got so many songs to sing, a shorter version of the same theme that is written in teacher language. By the way, anything I give you, or it's on our website, is downloadable, reproducible, without permission. Just go to www.gifted.uconn.edu and open up the folder called School-Wide Enrichment. This paper is called The 3 E's, which you all know now. What are the 3 E's? Enjoyment. Okay. The 3 E's of successful academic achievement, a counterintuitive approach to school improvement. Thank you all very much for your attention.